Well, hi, good morning. I'm Mike Dixon with Pit Weld U. We are everything welding education. We teach all processes of welding along with cutting, brazing, soldering. And today we're going to talk to you about proper tungsten prep. We want to make sure that you know how to properly prepare your tungsten and why you would want to use different angles of your grinding. So we'll get started here. When you're grinding a tungsten, you can have a longer 15-degree grind versus like a 30 to 60-degree grind, which is a shorter. You can have that with a very sharp pointed end or a blunt end. Now, each of those have different purposes. So depending on the joint geometry that I'm working with and welding, it will also determine the weld that or the preparation I'm going to make. Are we good? Okay. Okay, so when you're grinding the tungsten, like I said originally, the 15-degree grind is really great for like outside corner joints, lap joints, getting a very precise pinpoint arc. That grind is what I use for those type of joints. My daily, everyday go-to is a 30-degree with a blunt tip. This works for most other joints. Getting into like a carbon pipe where I really want to get down in the root and break those walls down, the 30-degree bevel will give me that opportunity to have a little bit more heat control and be able to break those walls down as I put the root pass in. Sometimes,
if I don't have a tungsten grinder at home, what do you recommend?
Well, you can use a pedestal grinder with a hard rock wheel. You could use a handheld grinder like a 4.5 inch with a sanding pad on it. You could even use a hard rock abrasive, which I don't recommend, but you could use a belt sander. The main thing when you're using any grinder is that it needs to be purpose used for tungsten preparation only, because anything that's on that grinding wheel or on that sanding belt, as you grind it, it's going to impregnate into the tungsten, microscopically. And when you strike that first arc, whatever was impregnated will then be spit back into your weld puddle. That can create impurities, porosities, and give you a weaker weld or a weld that will not pass. So you want to make sure that you're grinding properly. And what I mean that you have to have your grinding marks running longitudinal with your tungsten. You don't want them running around this way. What'll happen is if you grind it, if you're on a pedestal grinder and you're grinding like this on the side, the grinding marks are going to go around the tungsten. Well, when you strike the arc is going to rotate around the tungsten, possibly. When you have it longitudinal, the arc will be more direct, more straight into the joint. You always want to make sure that you do that. The other thing is you want to be careful that you don't get these little excess grinding marks where when you're on the grinding wheel that you're allowing the tungsten to come up too far on the grinding wheel, and it adds in these little striation marks which can alter your arc and give you arc that will be unstable or fluctuate. So I hope that with that little bit of information that you'll now know how to properly prepare your tungsten. Make sure that you grind it always lengthwise with your tungsten. Make sure you're using the correct tungsten for the correct weld. All your new manufacturers will send out a gray stripe tungsten, which is a 2% serrated tungsten. This was the replacement for the previous thoriated tungsten. The serrated is good for all processes, AC, DC, and welding on all materials within the GTAW process. Purple stripe tungsten, the latest, greatest, one of the EW3s. So instead of having one alloy element in the tungsten, we have 3 alloy elements. Now, there's multiple manufacturers that make EW3. So the amount of element and the type of element that is put into the EW3 can vary from manufacturer to manufacturer. But in all around, on the market today, EW3 is very popular tungsten. We use it in our facility along with the serrated. Much safer than the 2% thoriated, the red stripe tungsten, which is somewhat radioactive when ground. If you are still using the 2% thoriated, make sure that you're not getting your head into the grinding dust or the dust that's coming off the tungsten grinder as you prepare it. I hope these tips will help you, and I appreciate your time.